Hello and welcome to a new series. This month I'm going to be making my Renaissance Festival costume. By the time I post this series, I will have already gone to the Renaissance Festival and it will be over because most of them end around Halloween, but I really wanted to do a Halloween specific costume and a Renaissance Festival specific costume, so that's kind of what we're doing. For this video, I'm going to start with the chemise and the stays. I'm going to be using the same pattern for the chemise that I used for my witch chemise, and for the stays I will be using a different pattern. My general idea for this costume is to do a fairy costume because I've been really into like wanting to make my own fairy wings, and I just generally want to make some fun autumn themed clothes. This one will be a little bit more fantastical than the witch. The witch I was going for a lot of like really natural stuff, whereas this one, because it's kind of more fantasy based and it's a Renaissance festival, I want to be kind of glittery and exciting and very fall themed. So I've got some fabrics in mind that I've pulled from my stash, and hopefully those will all work out. I think I've come up with a really cute combination and I didn't have to buy any fabric for this, so that's great, except for the chemise. Just like for the witch, I also had to buy fabric for the chemise. I don't have really large amounts of chiffon, so I did buy some fabric from Silk Baron for the chemise. It's really pretty, but it's very lightweight, so hopefully it's not too much of a pain to cut and sew. We'll see. But yeah, it's gonna be pretty basic. This is gonna be a little bit of a shorter series because there are fewer weeks in November, but I'm super excited to get started, and I'm really excited to make a fairy costume. I haven't been to the Renaissance Festival since I was in high school, and I'm just so excited to go. I used to go like every weekend in high school. I was also not of drinking age when I used to go a lot, so I'm really excited to like try the mead and like whatever local wines they have. I think that'll be a lot of fun. And just generally, I have a little bit more of a disposable income, so I'm excited to go shopping at the Renaissance Festival and live my best high school dream life. Alright, so that's the general plan. I'm going to be making the chemise and the stays this week, and then we'll be making skirts and some accessories the next couple videos. So let's go look at the sketch and then the pattern. So here are my fairy sketches. Like the witch, I did 3 separate sketches, and I kind of had different ideas for all of them. This was based off of a doll I saw on Pinterest with more of the high waist, kind of empire waist, and I think that's a little bit more Italian Renaissance as well. This was just kind of like Renaissance fairy. I don't know, both of these are just kind of generic Renaissance fairy, but I am mostly drawn to this one mostly because I like the stays on this. Very similar to the witch stays, but without tabs, so you know, don't come for me. The chemise is going to be the same, and then instead of the chemise kind of like making the draping parts like I did with the witch, this is going to be an overlayer of lace. I've got all my swatches right here, so this is going to be the lace overlayer, and then I've got this poly shantung as my base skirt, and then this is going to be for the stays. These were just some other extra ones. I think that I'm going to be going with this one specifically, maybe with slightly smaller wings, because I don't want to run into people at the Renaissance Festival. Maybe someday I will get around to making these other 2 designs as well, but I just wanted to show you guys that this is the sketch. I did a sketch, and that's pretty much it. I didn't do a rendering because I am really limited by how much fabric I have, because I chose fabrics very purposefully from my stash, and I'm limited by how much of each of those fabrics I have in making my design. Let's go take a look at patterns now. For my fairy costume, I'm going to be using Butterick B4254, and I'm going to be using the top left pattern because I want it to have this style without the lacing. I already know that I'm going to be taking the tabs off just because I don't want them stylistically, and this is for the Renaissance Festival. However, we're skewing pretty late. The Renaissance, I think, goes until like 16th century or 17th century, and this is definitely 18th century and closer to the 1780s according to Corset and Crinoline. This is the book that I used to check to see if this pattern is historical or not. I am completely ignoring the diagonal of these 2, but these 2 seem to be pretty in line with what could be found historically in the late 1700s. So if you compare these 2 corsets, this one looks very similar to this one actually. They both have the banding across the bust area there, the diagonal bones across the side panels, and straight bones just going up and down along the center front. So this is actually very, very similar. So that's kind of cool that this is actually a fairly historical, commercially available pattern. The other one on the bottom right also seems pretty accurate. There are stays from the 1790s that have front lacing, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with using this pattern, even if I'm not quite in the right time period for the Renaissance Festival. It's kind of the trendy look for Renaissance festivals right now, so I'm happy to use this. I have got the mock-up all done, so it's ready for a fitting. You might recognize what I am wearing from when I did my fitting for the witch stays, because I have decided to do both of the mock-ups at once. I thought it would just be a little bit more efficient, so I am making this mock-up quite far ahead of time. I thought it would be more efficient to make both mock-ups at the same time, so that's why I'm doing both fittings on the same day and why I'm wearing the same outfit. I made a few more alterations to these stays than I did on my witch stays because I took off all the tabs because I wanted a tabless stays. Hopefully that still looks okay. I also did the same thing as I did previously, where I had cut off my lacing panel on a different mock-up and I just stuck that straight onto here. However, because this one laces in the back, I'm gonna need Micah's help with that, so I'm gonna go grab it really quick.
Alrighty.
Your moms will be so happy when you make a guest appearance.
Hi, moms!
Is that closed all the way on the top?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's too big for me.
Yeah, it's closed all the way on all of it except the very bottom right now.
Okay, this is a lot too big.
Oops.
Maybe this whole thing needs to just come up. Oh, that looks a little bit. I don't like this. This is ugly. Okay, so this whole stays is just like far too big. This is the buttering pattern, and for one, I think that it needs, I don't know where the seam is, so this seam probably needs to come in. I wish it had a seam here, but I think maybe if it's just tighter generally, it'll help smooth this part out. I think also taking in maybe the center back. Let me look at this. If you recall the witch stays fitting, I had a problem where these were too far to the center, but this time it's too far to the side. So I think maybe if I just take in from the center back here, that'll help move everything more this way. I also don't like how high the center back neck is, so I think I'll lower that neckline quite a bit. And then just taking it in all the way around. Hopefully that'll be good enough. Mostly this is fine, it just really needs to be taken in quite a bit. I even like cut it a size smaller than I thought I would need because usually these patterns are too big, but oh well. And then these are definitely too long, which I figured would happen at least on one of these just because I have pretty short shoulders, like from here to here is like shorter on me than most people, but this is definitely way too small. So I think if I take them both to about where the safety pin heads sit, like that would look better, and then there's a little space for the ribbon. Other than that, like the shape is fine. I think this needs to be taken up because this is just way too long. You can't even see it in the frame. I know, that's too long. So I think I would prefer for this to be like that, and maybe for this to be lengthened a little bit in the waist, but it's actually not too bad where that is. Okay, can you help me now?
Mm-hmm.
For the lining on these stays, I decided I'm just going to repurpose my mock-up fabric. It's in pretty good condition still. Nothing seems to have warped out of place, and the pieces only got smaller. None of them got bigger. So they should all fit here. The only one that might be an issue is the center front pieces. I do want this on the fold anyway, so I'm going to recut this one. And then these moved anyway, so I would have probably had to recut that. But the side pieces and the back pieces are all pretty good, I think. So I'm hoping that I can just reuse this. Is that a cute girl? Hello? Oh, a fluffy girl. those cute toes. So cute. In my Which Stays video, I talked about binding the edges in ribbon rather than bias tape because it helps keep everything from stretching out, and I am now binding it in bias tape. However, this is just a decorative corset stays and not really a functional one, so I'm not really too worried. It's not going to take too much strain. It is better to use something that's not stretched to bind this, but I wanted something shiny to bind it with, and I wasn't sure that I could find a nice cotton satin ribbon, or if I could find a silk satin ribbon, that would probably be more expensive. And I already had a bunch of this gold fabric laying around, so this is what I've decided to do. It should be fine. Hello! Tips for cutting chiffon. Because it's so sheer, you don't want to mark the stitching lines like you normally do on fabric. I guess with commercial patterns, they usually just have you mark the cutting lines and not the stitching lines. However, it's kind of just better practice to mark the stitching lines because it's more precise. But with chiffon, because it's so sheer, those lines will still stick around after you've sewn them all up, which is not cute, so we try to avoid that. So instead you mark the cutting lines and then make sure you have a really precise seam allowance. Because this is going to be a really large garment, it's a chemise, so the precision is a little bit less important, but still pretty important, so it's just something to keep in mind. The second tip when cutting chiffon, because it's so slippery, especially silk chiffon, I'm using serrated scissors. So I don't know if you can tell, but there's a little serrated edge on the blade of these scissors, and that helps grip the chiffon so it doesn't slip away and like get pushed off of the scissors while I'm cutting. These are Ginger serrated scissors, and they're super helpful when cutting really slippery fabrics. Doing French seams on everything, so I'm going to be sewing everything right sides together first at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, then I'll trim it down and stitch it again with wrong sides together at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, generally, oh no, you do want done. Hey, thank you guys for watching. Some thoughts on these patterns. The chemise pattern was fine. I used this for the witch, so I already knew that it was gonna go okay. This fabric was so much worse to cut and to sew than the witch fabric. Because it's a much thinner silk, it looks really pretty, but it wrinkles really poorly. I probably should have ironed this before I wore it in the reveal, but that's okay. It looks kind of like a choice, even though it's not really a choice. I washed it and I did not iron it. So for the stays, I think they turned out really cute. However, the pattern was not great. I ended up having to size it down quite a bit. It was way too big at the recommended size, so I did make it smaller. In that regard, I would suggest the red threaded pattern over the butterick pattern, because I didn't have to do much for the red threaded pattern in my witch stays as I did for this. The other thing that I had an issue with, there's a bunch of boning that goes horizontally across the bust. I think that's really useful if you are quite busty. I don't really need all that much support, but it was still fine. The thing that was the problem though is that where the horizontal and the vertical bones meet, because you're supposed to leave a little bit of a gap in boning channels for bones to like have some wiggle room, right? So they're not really taut and they don't poke through. That kind of caused an issue in that where like the two directions of bonings met, it kind of crunched in on itself, so it would pull down a lot. So I was like very in danger of exposure for a lot of it. Thankfully my hair is so long that it just kind of covers this whole thing, so even if there was any slippage, it didn't cause a problem, and I was able to just fix it without anybody noticing, as far as I know. But that is something to keep in mind, that it does kind of like crunch in where those two meet, because if the vertical boning slips down, there's a little bit of space where it's just fabric at the top of that and then kind of folds in on itself, which is not great. Maybe making those bones longer so it does fill the entire thing, or like tacking a little bit, or doing, I don't know, some kind of flossing at the bottom so they do really stay in place nicely would help out. I don't know, but with the way I did it, it is a little bit of a problem. So I might go back and do a couple tacks at the bottom of each bone to make sure that they do stay up and pressed up against the horizontal boning rather than sliding down and causing the crunching. Other than that, I think that it went really well. I did take off all the tabs on these stays, and I don't know if that would affect the fit. I think taking the tabs off make the stays easier to fit rather than keeping them on. I don't know that for sure, but that's kind of my guess. Kind of hard to lace it in the back by myself, but it is doable. I just kind of lace it most of the way in the front, shift it around, and then struggle with the last couple grommets on the back. But it's really easy to wear. It's pretty comfortable, and like I basically just don't notice it while I'm wearing, so that's great. I'm able to eat in it. That's always good. So 10 out of 10 recommend making your own pair of stays. Alright, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see the rest of this series, next week I'm going to be making some pretty armbands and some skirts to go with my chemise and stays. And then we'll be going to the Renaissance Festival eventually in this costume. And if you have any suggestions for other types of Renaissance Festival outfits you want to see, or like other patterns for stays you want me to try out, I'd be happy to do that. I'm really having fun making a lot of different stays. So leave a comment if you have any advice or suggestions. If you want to see the rest of this costume and you want to see the Renaissance Festival, then please subscribe. I hope to see you in the next video. Okay, bye!